Welcome to Fork in the Road. This is Rusty Gaillard. I am your host. I am happy to have you with us today. Fork in the Road is a conversation with successful business leaders who have achieved a degree of success in their life, and it's about their journey to get there. Looking at some of the forks in the road, the decision points, some of the events that happened to help them get to this point in their life. I'm very pleased to have today Janice Litvin joining us. Janice is a speaker and a best-selling author of the book Banish Burnout. She's got a fascinating career journey, and I look forward to exploring that with her today. So please join me in welcoming Janice. Janice, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rusty. I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely. So one thing just to mention before we jump in is that for anyone who's watching live, please feel free to ask questions, put comments in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts and happy to interact with you live as we go along. So Janice, as we get started, one of the things I think is fascinating is that you're this author, you're a speaker, you're standing up on stage, helping people with this topic of banishing burnout, but you started your career as an IT systems analyst. And how do you get from A to B? Maybe you could just walk us through at least one or two of the steps along that journey, because it's just fascinating.
Well, there are different, as you talk about forks in the road, there are a number of them. And part of the journey included my quitting what my parents thought was this fabulous job as a software engineer for Bank of America back in many years ago. I quit after 4 years because what I realized was that I didn't really love computer programming. What I loved was talking to the people about computer programming. And I decided to become a professional dancer, which I know has nothing to do with computer programming, but it was a lifelong dream of mine. And in my 20s, I said to myself, it's now or never. You have to make your own decisions for your life. Never mind that you have a math degree and that your mother told you a woman in technology would always find you a job. I really wanted to be a professional dancer. And that, in a circuitous way, brought me to Zumba, which brought me to what I'm doing today.
Wow. So that was a part of your background I didn't know. But just tell us for a minute about the courage or the guts it took to make that decision, right? I mean, because at this point you've invested time and energy and money in a degree, in a career. There's a bunch of family momentum behind that, right? Your mom telling you this is a good career, all of that. Like, it takes a lot of guts to step out of that. How did you, I'm just curious in your experience of that. Was there how did you get there? How did you get the guts
It's
to make
so
that call?
Well, it's funny. It's funny when you ask me about guts because I don't look at it that way. I looked at it in such a way that a lot of my dance friends were moving from San Francisco to LA. And so it sort of felt like going to grad school in a way. It was like a bunch of people are moving to LA. I think I'll go too. It'll be so much fun. And we all lived in the same neighborhood. We all went to a lot of the same dance classes. We all got together for dinner, et cetera, afterwards, and we all did a lot of, in fact, one of my first jobs was with some of those friends in Reno. So I felt like that I would be missing out on my true life. So in other words, my true desire overtook the obstacle that you call needing guts.
Yeah, yeah. I like that.
But
I like
I
that.
want to tell you this very cute vignette that'll take just a second. I'll never forget. In fact, I can picture this conversation of me cooking dinner, calling my parents saying, guess what? Guess what? I'm going to be dancing in a casino in Reno, Nevada. And my father grabbing the phone from my mother saying, a nice Jewish girl doesn't dance on a stage in Reno, and you owe it to me to live a normal life.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I mean, talk about family pressure. And there's something in that, because I think many of it, obviously our family loves us and they want the best for us. But
Right.
oftentimes they're not the ones who are going to be the biggest supporters of us in going off and pursuing our dreams, what we really want and love, because they've got their idea of what success is
Right.
and what respectable behavior looks like and all of that. Um,
Right.
well, Janice, before we jumped on, you were talking about starting your own business, and at some point you started your own business, but how did you get, like, I don't know, what was the journey between dancing? Did you go back to work in tech, or, how did you end up with your own business?
Well, after 2 years of hit or miss jobs and doing a lot of odd jobs, like
Mhm.
working at Bub's Big Boy or typing in law firms, I did come back to tech. I did come back to San Francisco and I got a job, which turned out to be one of the best learning experiences of my life, working for a company called Computer Sciences Corporation as a software support rep. And I had the world's best boss. I talk about him all the time. His name was Frank. I'm still friends with him to this day, even though we haven't worked together in many years. And not only did I do software support, which meant I was going out visiting clients, which was really the perfect job for me. But somewhere along the way, after a few months, he said, I think you should become our branch trainer. And I said, I think you're right. And that opened up a whole new world for me because it brought me to public speaking.
There's something in there about, the people that you're surrounded with and the people you work for. Yeah, so much of job seekers, when they're out there looking for a job, there's so much of a focus on what is the job, what is the title, what is the responsibilities, all of that.
Right.
But what you're pointing to is it matters a lot who you're working for, right? I mean, you've developed a lifelong relationship with this person who helped open up a whole new opportunity for you. And it's all because of the person you were working with.
Absolutely. And I say this all the time. Well, it's a known fact that, and this is particularly pertinent now during this thing we have called the Great Resignation, that people leave managers, not companies. Although I would take it one step further, and people are leaving companies that don't have the kind of culture they want to live with. And again, it's important to the degree you have control over your life to find the right environment for you and to make a list of questions that will help you determine, is this the boss I want to work for? And is this the company I want to work for? What are their policies about wellness? What are their policies about working from home? Are they going to make everybody come back to work when the return to work happens? What are their policies about choosing your own projects? What are their policies about asking your opinion about
Mhm.
projects?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I think about in today's economy is that the power dynamic has shifted. If you go back a few years, it was the power seemed to be much more with the employers. And if you were
Right.
looking for a job, you would accommodate their requests. And the power dynamic has shifted. And I think that's what you're pointing to with these questions is, hey, recognize that you have more influence and more power to ask for what you want and to go out and find it.
Right.
I'm curious for this person that you worked for, if you rewind and think about that relationship and think about the many years that you've known each other since, what were the characteristics that made him such a positive boss and such a good person to work with?
Well, first of all, he cared for us like little brothers and sisters. He was just a
Mhm.
few years older than I. He was very, very smart technically, but he had an innate sense of emotional intelligence. You know, a lot of people get promoted for technical skills and have no emotional intelligence. He called me, if he was not in the office on Monday morning, he called me, or he called me on Tuesday morning. How's it going? What are you working on? What problems are you having? What help? What do you need from me? Every single night at 5:30, as he walked out of the office, he came up to my desk and said, why aren't you packing up to leave? It's time for you to go home. I said, well, I just have this one more thing to finish. He said, that one more thing will be there tomorrow. Pack up, write yourself a note if you need to, but go home. It's 5:30, time for you to go home. He took us out to lunch. Whenever we had to go on a joint appointment, he always drove. He always said, how's it going? How's your social life? What are you up to? Do you want
Mhm.
to get together socially? I mean, and he meant that in the utmost respect. He was married. I had a boyfriend, but we would go out as two couples or as small groups. We would go out. And so he got to know me in a way that had nothing to do with work.
It's so interesting because, as you think about your boss and you think about leaders, oftentimes we think about what makes them a good and effective leader or a good boss. Oftentimes we think about intelligence, we think about the experience they have, ways we can learn from them. But what you're pointing to is the lasting impression that you have of your relationship has nothing to do with his intelligence or his experience on the job. It all has to do with his people skills. And the
Right.
way you learned from him was about the people skills, which I'm sure in some ways translated into your book about managing burnout, which we'll come to in a few moments.
Right.
Um,
Right. And it's funny, I was invited to his retirement party a few years ago, and my husband and drove up to the foothills of California. I think their town is called Sutter Creek or something like that, outside of Sacramento. And I felt like I was sitting with one of my long lost best friends. You know how you
mm,
feel when you talk to a really good friend? I mean,
yeah.
we were sitting eye to eye chatting about the last 20 years, and also just about what's going on in our lives now, and we could have that tight friendship connection that we had back then.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love old relationships like that, the way they carry through.
Yes.
So you talked just a few minutes ago about moving to LA, starting your dance career, moving to Reno, how that didn't feel like it took a lot of guts, right? Because it was like going to grad school and moving with friends and just flowing in that pack. You also described to me earlier before we jumped on live here starting your own business and not having a lot of money saved up, but just deciding it was the right decision. So, how did that fit into your story here?
Well, that's funny too. That was a similar situation about pleasure over pain. So
Mm,
I was working for Levi Strauss as a QA software tech. And this is before the days that QA was automated like it is now. We had to make up all our own test cases and write up all our own documentation. It was all done from scratch. And I hated this job. I absolutely hated it. The person that interviewed me and hired me was somebody I had known from Bank of America. 2 weeks after I got there, he quit. And so
mm,
the person that replaced him was not a fit for me at all, but I wasn't going to quit a job 2 weeks after getting there. So I stayed, and I made friends with certain people around the company, but it was a painful job
mm.
emotionally. This person was so far off in terms of our relationship. We got along, but barely. And so I'll never forget. I wrote a note on how they used to really push affirmations, and to some degree,
Mhm.
people still do push affirmations. So I had this big note on my refrigerator that said, I will quit Levi Strauss by, and I had a certain date. And I'll never forget talking about my parents again. They had come for a visit. My father said, I see this note on your refrigerator. Why would you want to quit such a great job, Levi Strauss? And I got myself a 28% pay raise when I went there. And I said, because I hate it there. I'm unhappy with the work. I can't stand my boss. I do have 3 good friends, but that's it. And so at that time, I had become friendly with some people who were self-employed. Number one, I had joined National Speakers Association back then. I had also joined a group in San Francisco called Women Entrepreneurs, and I had joined another group that my good friend Patricia Fripp had started, because there were male only business groups. And so she and a group started this female business club that I joined. And so I had this weekly support or monthly support by going to all these meetings where I learned a lot about being self-employed. And so it was a matter of driving myself to the pleasure over the pain of my job.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think about that, and I think about your dance story that you shared earlier, and in both cases, there was community involved. You were not on your own trying to go off and create this thing. You were surrounded by people who were pursuing something similar to what you were pursuing, right? In the dance case, that was literally everybody was dancers, but in this case, I'm sure there was all sorts of diversity, but you were surrounded by people who were living a life that was different from what you were doing, but was
Right.
something you were aspiring to, and they were also growing and taking action steps. So it's fascinating to hear that the value in your experience looking back of these communities, these people who will stand with you and help you take those steps and move forward. Now, oftentimes starting your business can feel like there's some trade-off or some sacrifice involved. Was that your experience?
Absolutely. Every time I've started a business, I've started 2 businesses. Well, 3 if you count Zumba as a business. Um, revenue doesn't fly in the moment you start. There's some upswing. And so, yes, there were financial sacrifices, but I was so happy that
Mm.
the joy of being my own boss overcame any frustration of not having the money to do the things I wanted to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think there's a life lesson in that.
Absolutely. You have to find your, you know, people think happiness comes from having things. Some people think happiness comes from having a lot of money and having a lot of things. And you need money to live, clearly. But once you have enough money to live, pay the bills, and feed and clothe yourself, how much more, or at whatever level of lifestyle you want, how much more money do you need? Where do you draw the line between money and joy?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, well, so tell us a little bit about, as I think about money and the pursuit of money, we live in Silicon Valley, and in Silicon Valley, like that's in the air here. It's like, everybody wants more. There's always a driving for more, and that can be very consuming. And, I know you talk and you're an expert on burnout. I'm curious, it's relevant, obviously, here in Silicon Valley, as I'm alluding to, but I'm curious, how did you get to burnout as an area of interest and an area of focus?
Well, that's also a funny circuitous story. So, as you know, we had a recession in 2008. And at that time, I was doing tech recruiting, which was an offshoot of the software consulting business. And after 20 years, I was tired of it. I needed a change. And there was no work because of the recession. So I thought, I have nothing to do. I should go to the gym. I love to move and I love to dance. And I should go to the gym. So I dropped my son off at school every single morning, dressed ready for the gym, and went straight to the gym. At this gym, I found Zumba Fitness. I had never heard of it. It was still kind of new. And I started taking these classes and I thought, oh, this is a lot of fun. And meanwhile, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next with my career. I was really at a real crossroads. I was totally a blank slate, but I knew it had nothing to do with recruiting or directly with
Mhm.
technology. So I said, I should become a Zumba instructor. That would be a lot of fun. Thank God my husband was gainfully employed. And so I could afford, but actually now I take it back. When I first started teaching Zumba, because of the recession, he had a gap in employment. So
Mm.
we really tightened our belt buckles for that year. But I did become a Zumba instructor, and I've never looked back. That was in 2009, and I love it. I still teach it now on Zoom, and still having a lot of fun with it.
Well, it's so fascinating because again, for many of us who grew up with parents like you described, right? Why would you ever leave Wells Fargo? It's a great company, and I grew up with a very similar family.
Yeah.
Find a good company and stay there. And so when I left Apple, that was challenging for my dad in particular, for me to walk away from a great company like that.
Right.
But what you're pointing to is the I mean, your career is fascinating. You've had so many of these different experiences, willing to tighten the belt buckle but to embrace the possibility and to go forward towards what you really want in life, and just living a life of joy, right? Not pursuing this external definition of success, but living a life of joy and finding the value in that. So, how did Zumba though lead to banishing burnout?
Okay. I realized while you were asking that question that you had asked that before. So the way that Zumba led to banishing burnout. So after 2 or 3 years of teaching Zumba, I thought, I love teaching Zumba and I still need a mental challenge. And
Mhm.
so the next thing that sometimes you can only do what's right in front of you. For me, the next thing that was right in front of me was digging deep into the knowledge. And my mother was always a huge proponent of going back to college and spending all your life in a library, which was her favorite thing to do. And when I started college, she went back to school, got a degree in accounting. So that role modeling had a huge impact on me. So I decided to go back to school. And interestingly, I went to my community college, Diablo Valley College, and my son started at Diablo Valley College at the same time, though God forbid you
Funny.
should have lunch with your mother on campus. So he would
Right.
wave at me and say hi on campus, but that was it. So I wanted the anatomy, the physiology, the nutrition, and the psychology. So I joined their personal training program for the knowledge, not to be a personal trainer. And what really resonated for me was the psychology. And in college, I had
Mhm.
always taken a lot of psychology classes. And so I love that program. I got a certification in group fitness, which is a certification, believe it or not. And then I was thinking, now how can I turn this into a corporate business, a business that
Mhm.
serves the corporate market? I didn't want to just go and teach Zumba classes. And
Mhm.
after some soul searching and talking to some friends, I realized that one of my lifelong dreams had been to become a professional speaker.
Mm.
And as I mentioned earlier, I had joined NSA when I was a software trainer, but I thought at that time, I thought, oh no, I could never be a motivational speaker. Well, here I was trying to figure out how to transition, and having fitness as a topic, which certainly requires a lot of motivation, made a lot of sense. So I started out speaking about healthy eating and fitness and how to
Mm.
find intrinsic motivation for fitness and healthy eating. And then one day, a client called me up with 3 weeks' notice and said, we'd love for you to do a talk on stress, but we don't want the typical mindfulness meditation. We already know that, we can get that anywhere. We want you to go deep. I said, are you sure? Because I can go as deep as the next person. I've been there. I've gone deep. And so she said yes. And so I had done some research and I had some books, and I devised this program, which was the genesis of Banish Burnout Toolkit. And so it had a lot to do with digging into your behavior patterns to understand where you were with the way you reacted to stress. And so
Mm.
that led me to what I'm doing today.
That's fascinating. So I'd like to just, given that we've been going this fascinating conversation, you've got such an interesting background, so fun to talk to. For those people who are interested in getting to know you more, who want to dig into banishing burnout and the Banish Burnout Toolkit, and like, what's the best way to get in touch with you and to connect with you?
My website, which is janicelitvin.com, you can see it spelled there in front of you, janicelitvin.com, or friend me on LinkedIn. I'm LinkedIn is like my best friend. I'm on LinkedIn almost all day.
Yeah, good. Well, Janice, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for sharing about your journey, your career, all the forks in the road, and all the great lessons that you've shared with us today. So thanks for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Russ. Thank you. You're the consummate interviewer. Thank you so much, Rusty.
Thank you.